I never thought my printer habits would trigger a corporate meltdown. When HR confronted me about using 799 pages in a month, calling it supply theft, I didn't argue. I just smiled and said, "Check what I printed." They had no idea those documents revealed systematic financial fraud at the highest levels of our company. I wasn't stealing paper. I was gathering evidence. 4 hours after that meeting, SEC investigators swarmed our building. By evening, 3 executives were escorted out in handcuffs. Let me explain how it happened. My name is Caitlin Adams, and until 6 months ago, I was just another senior financial analyst at Westwood Financial Services in downtown Chicago. Nothing about my life suggested I'd soon be at the center of one of the biggest corporate fraud cases of the decade. I'd been with Westwood for 6 years, having joined right after completing my MBA at Northwestern. The company had a stellar reputation, a mid-sized financial services firm known for consistent growth, ethical practices, and a client list that included some impressive Fortune 500 companies. Our marketing materials loved to boast about our integrity-first approach and transparent financial solutions. I believed in those values. We all did. My apartment was nothing special, a 1-bedroom on the 23rd floor of a building in Lincoln Park, with just enough space for my bookshelves, yoga mat, and the small desk where I occasionally worked from home. The view wasn't spectacular, but on clear days I could see Lake Michigan if I stood in just the right spot by my window. It wasn't luxurious, but it was mine, and I'd worked hard for it. My sister Allison lived about 20 minutes away with her husband and 2 kids. We tried to have Sunday dinner together twice a month, a tradition we'd maintained since I moved to Chicago. Allison was the family-oriented one, while I focused on my career. She never judged my choices, and I admired how she balanced her family life with her part-time work as a physical therapist. At Westwood, my immediate boss was Jack Hayes, a 42-year-old director of financial operations who had personally selected me from a pool of applicants 6 years earlier. Jack had been my mentor, always pushing me to look deeper into the numbers, to understand not just what they showed but what they might be hiding. "Financial statements tell stories, Caitlin," he often said. "Your job is to read between the lines." The irony of his advice would become painfully clear later. My closest friend at work was Tyler Reed, the 35-year-old head of our IT department. We'd bonded 3 years ago during a nightmare system upgrade that had us working late for weeks. Tyler was brilliant with computers, but terrible at office politics, which made him refreshingly honest. He'd helped me navigate the complex personalities at Westwood, and I'd helped him communicate technical issues to non-technical executives. What I didn't know until much later was that Tyler had feelings for me beyond friendship, something I was completely oblivious to at the time. The executive team that ran Westwood consisted of 3 people. CEO Richard Sullivan was in his early 60s, silver-haired and charismatic, with a talent for charming clients and inspiring employees. CFO Diane Blackwell, in her early 50s, had a reputation for brilliance with numbers and ruthless efficiency. And finally, there was COO Matthew Gordon, around 40, known for his operational expertise and ambition. They were like corporate royalty, rarely interacting with regular employees except at the annual holiday party or quarterly town halls. For years, everything seemed normal, challenging but normal. Then, about 8 months ago, I started noticing subtle changes. New security protocols limited access to certain financial systems. Meetings became more secretive. Interdepartmental collaboration, once encouraged, was suddenly discouraged. It felt like walls were being built between departments. Then came the email that changed everything. It was a Tuesday afternoon in April. I was reviewing quarterly projections when an email arrived from Diane Blackwell's executive assistant. The subject line read, "Updated Q2 adjustments. Confidential." I assumed it was meant for me since I was working on related forecasts. I opened the attachment, a spreadsheet with financial data. At first glance, everything looked routine. But as I scrolled through, comparing these numbers with the ones I'd been working with, something felt off. Revenue projections didn't match. Expense allocations were categorized differently, and there was a column labeled Reported that showed significantly better performance than the column labeled Actual. I double-checked the email recipients. My stomach dropped when I realized my name was not among the intended recipients. This had been sent to me by mistake. The spreadsheet wasn't meant for my eyes. I stared at my screen, the implications slowly sinking in. These weren't just administrative discrepancies or rounding errors. If what I was seeing was accurate, someone was maintaining two sets of financial records, one showing the company's true performance and another improved version being reported externally. My first instinct was to close the file and pretend I'd never seen it. This wasn't my problem to solve. But Jack's voice echoed in my head. Financial statements tell stories. And this story looked like fraud. I couldn't sleep that night. My mind raced with possibilities, most of them innocent explanations for what I'd seen. Perhaps it was a planning document, exploring different reporting methodologies. Maybe it was a training exercise. Possibly I had misunderstood the spreadsheet entirely. By morning, I decided to simply ignore the email, pretend it never happened. But as I sat at my desk, reviewing the quarterly numbers I was supposed to analyze, a sickening feeling grew in my stomach. The official figures I was working with matched the reported column in that accidental spreadsheet, not the actual one. I couldn't just look away. Not when my entire job was about financial integrity, not when investors and clients trusted our reports, not when my own work might be unwittingly contributing to something illegal. Over the next week, I carefully began digging deeper. I reviewed past quarterly reports, looking for patterns of discrepancy. I examined departmental budgets, searching for irregularities in how funds were allocated. I studied client billing records, looking for inconsistencies. I did all of this as discreetly as possible, under the guise of routine analysis. The more I looked, the more troubling patterns emerged. Revenues appeared to be inflated by 15 to 20% across multiple divisions. Expenses were being improperly categorized to improve profit margins. Most concerning, there were references to accounts I couldn't access, offshore entities with coded names like Artemis Holdings and Phoenix Ventures. I needed to talk to someone, but who? The compliance officer reported directly to Diane. The board members were all close with Richard. External auditors only saw what the company chose to show them. Finally, I decided to confide in Tyler. Not everything, just enough to get his perspective. Hypothetically, I asked during one of our lunch breaks, if someone at the company discovered financial irregularities, who should they talk to first? Tyler stopped mid-bite and studied my face. Hypothetically, he responded carefully, it would depend on the nature and scale of those irregularities, and who might be involved. Hypothetically, what if it might involve senior leadership? Tyler put down his sandwich. Then hypothetically, that person should be extremely careful, document everything, trust no one, and maybe consider talking to someone outside the company. He lowered his voice. This hypothetical situation, does it involve you, Caitlin? I tried to smile casually, just something I was wondering about. Financial analyst brain never shuts off, you know. Tyler didn't look convinced. Be careful, Kate. This building has eyes and ears everywhere. He wasn't wrong about that. Patricia Wilson, our HR director, was notorious for her surveillance of employees and unwavering loyalty to the executive team. 50-something with perfectly styled hair and always dressed in designer suits, Patricia viewed her role less as supporting employees and more as protecting the company from them. She had eyes throughout the organization, people who reported back to her about conversations, behaviors, or anything that might be considered problematic. With this in mind, I became more cautious. I began staying late, using after-hours time to access systems when fewer people were around. I carefully documented everything I found, taking screenshots and printing key documents. I used my personal phone to photograph especially damning evidence. After 3 weeks of investigation, the picture became disturbingly clear. For at least 2 years, Westwood had been systematically misrepresenting its financial performance to shareholders, clients, and regulators. Profits were inflated. Losses were hidden. Client funds were being temporarily diverted to cover shortfalls before being returned. It was sophisticated, deliberate fraud. One evening, as I was printing another batch of evidence, Julia Barnes, a 26-year-old junior analyst who had joined the company 8 months earlier, stopped by my desk. "Working late again?" she asked. genuine curiosity in her voice. I quickly minimized my screen, just trying to get ahead of the quarterly review. Julia nodded, but her eyes lingered on the stack of papers emerging from the printer nearby. "You've been putting in a lot of extra hours lately. Everything okay?" "Just thoroughness," I replied. "You know how it is." "Sure," she said, though she sounded unconvinced. "Well, don't work too hard. See you tomorrow." As she walked away, I wondered if her interest was innocent curiosity or something else. Was she reporting back to someone? Was I being paranoid? The next morning, I arrived to find that my computer access had changed. Several financial databases I'd been using were suddenly restricted. Access denied messages greeted my login attempts. When I called IT support about it, they claimed it was a new security protocol being implemented company-wide. But when I casually asked other analysts about it at lunch, none of them had experienced any access changes. Later that day, I noticed something else. A tiny new icon in my computer's system tray, monitoring software, that hadn't been there before. When I hovered over it, the tooltip simply read WFS Security Module. They were watching my digital movements. My heart raced. They knew. Somehow, they knew I was investigating. But how much did they know? How much time did I have before they shut me down completely? That evening, I didn't go home until 8:30. I printed another 70 pages of evidence, slipping them into a locked drawer in my desk after everyone had left. As I walked to the elevator, I noticed the light still on in Patricia's office. Through the glass wall, I could see her watching me, phone pressed to her ear. She didn't smile or wave. She just watched. I knew then that the clock was ticking. They were watching me now, which meant I needed to be smarter, more careful. I developed a system. During regular hours, I'd do my assigned work perfectly, raising no suspicions. I'd even work on a fake side project, a legitimate-looking analysis of client retention patterns that would appear reasonable if anyone checked my screen. The real investigation happened on weekends and late evenings. Tyler, without asking too many questions, gave me access to his administrator credentials for a data recovery project. This allowed me to bypass some of the new restrictions placed on my account. "I don't know what you're doing," he told me, "and I don't want to know. But whatever it is, be careful. There's been talk about unusual system access patterns in executive meetings. I developed a new routine. I'd arrive early on Saturdays when the office was nearly empty, using Tyler's credentials to access restricted systems. I'd download what I needed, store it on an encrypted drive, and review it at home. Then on Sunday evenings, I'd return to print the most critical documents, storing them in a locked cabinet that only financial department staff could access. Why print when digital would be easier? Because I didn't trust the digital trail. If the executives were as savvy as I suspected, electronic evidence could be altered or deleted. Paper was harder to make disappear, especially if they didn't know exactly what I had. My relationship with Jack became increasingly strained. He questioned my unusual hours, my distracted demeanor in meetings, my requests for information outside my normal scope. "Is everything all right, Caitlin?" he asked one afternoon. "You seem preoccupied lately." "Just trying to be thorough," I answered, the phrase becoming my standard response. "You know you can talk to me if something's bothering you," he said, concern in his eyes. "About work? About anything." I nodded, forcing a smile. "I appreciate that, Jack. I'm fine, really. Just focused on some complex analysis." Could I trust Jack? He'd been my mentor, my advocate, but he also reported directly to Diane. If he wasn't involved in the fraud, telling him would put him in danger. If he was involved, I couldn't take that risk. Not yet. Not until I had enough evidence to be certain. By the 6th week of my investigation, I'd confirmed that the fraud went beyond simple misreporting. Westwood was misrepresenting its financial position to shareholders by hundreds of millions of dollars. The offshore accounts I'd discovered appeared to be holding diverted funds. And most damning of all, I found evidence that Richard, Diane, and Matthew had structured their compensation packages to receive massive bonuses based on the fraudulent performance metrics. Most troubling was what I discovered about their stock trading patterns. All three executives had scheduled massive sales of their personal company shares, transactions set to execute 3 days after the next quarterly report. They knew something bad was coming, and they were positioning themselves to cash out before it hit. Patricia from HR had moved beyond passive observation. She initiated a resource audit across all departments, with particular focus on printing and supply usage. The message went out to all employees, but when she personally stopped by my desk to make sure I'd seen it, her meaning was clear. She was watching me specifically. "We've noticed unusual patterns in resource consumption," she said with a thin smile. "The company takes conservation seriously. I'm sure you understand." I smiled back. "Absolutely. Waste not, want not, right?" "Indeed," she replied, her eyes cold. "We're tracking everything now. Paper, toner, even after-hours electricity usage. Just so you're aware." The threat was clear, but it came too late. I already had hundreds of pages of evidence secured. Now I just needed to determine my next steps. The confrontation with Diane happened 3 days later. She appeared at my desk unannounced, something that had never happened before. "Caitlin," she said, her voice pleasant but her eyes sharp. "Do you have a moment to chat?" She led me to a small conference room and closed the door. "I've been hearing good things about your work over the years," she began. "Jack speaks highly of your analytical skills." "Thank you," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "That's good to hear. I'm curious, though, about some of your recent activities. You've been accessing systems outside your normal scope, working unusual hours, printing extraordinary amounts of material." Her smile never faltered. "Is there a special project you're working on that I should know about?" My heart pounded, but I kept my expression neutral. "Nothing special, just being thorough with the quarterly reconciliations. Some discrepancies required deeper investigation." "Discrepancies?" Her voice sharpened slightly. "What kind of discrepancies?" "Probably just input errors," I said with a casual shrug. "You know how it is with data entry. But I like to make sure everything balances properly." Diane studied me for a long moment. "Caitlin, let me give you some friendly advice. Focus on your assigned tasks. Leave broader concerns to those with the proper authority and context. Digging into areas outside your responsibility can lead to misunderstandings." "I appreciate the guidance," I replied. As I turned to leave, she added, "Oh, and Caitlin, if you do encounter anything that seems concerning, come directly to me. Open door policy. No need to compile extensive documentation or involve others. That just creates unnecessary confusion." The message couldn't have been clearer. She knew exactly what I was doing, and she was warning me to stop. I was running out of time, but I still lacked the final pieces of evidence that would make the case irrefutable. I needed access to the executive-level financial summaries, documents that only Jack and the C-suite could access. That evening, I found Jack waiting by my desk as I returned from a meeting. "Can we talk?" he asked quietly. "Not here. Dinner, maybe?" We met at a small restaurant 10 blocks from the office. After ordering, Jack leaned forward. "You've been investigating the financial reporting, haven't you?" he asked without preamble. I froze, fork halfway to my mouth. "What makes you think that?" "Because I've been doing the same thing for the past year," he replied. "And I think we need to compare notes." I couldn't believe what Jack was telling me. For over a year, he'd been gathering evidence of financial fraud at Westwood. He documented discrepancies in revenue recognition, discovered hidden liabilities, and identified the same offshore accounts I'd found. "Why didn't you say anything?" I asked, still processing this revelation. "For the same reason you didn't come to me," he replied. "I couldn't risk trusting anyone until I had enough evidence. But I've been watching you, Caitlin. The late hours, the printing, the access requests. I recognized the patterns because they matched my own. For the first time in weeks, I felt a sense of relief. I wasn't alone in this. We need to coordinate," Jack continued. "Combine our evidence. Make the case airtight before we take it to the authorities. If we move too soon with incomplete evidence, they'll destroy what remains and discredit us. We'll lose everything, the case, our careers, possibly more." Over the next 2 weeks, Jack and I worked together in careful coordination. We met outside the office, comparing documents and building a comprehensive case file. Tyler provided technical assistance, helping us access secured files without leaving digital fingerprints. "I'm not asking what you're doing," Tyler said, as he created a secure channel for transferring data. "But whatever it is, I've got your back, both of you." With Jack's higher-level access, we uncovered even more damning evidence. The fraud was more extensive than I'd initially realized, stretching back at least 3 years. Client funds had been temporarily misappropriated to cover operating shortfalls. Fake transactions had been created to inflate revenue, and the 3 executives had collectively pocketed over $40 million in fraudulent bonuses. During this time, I also grew closer to Julia Barnes, the junior analyst who had noticed my unusual behavior weeks earlier. She began stopping by my desk regularly, offering to help with my workload or bringing me coffee when I looked tired. "You seem stressed," she said one afternoon. "Is everything okay?" After weeks of secrecy, it felt good to have someone express genuine concern. While I didn't share the details of my investigation, I admitted that I was dealing with a difficult professional situation. "Sometimes doing the right thing isn't easy," I said. Julia nodded. "I know that feeling. Just remember you're not alone, okay? More people might be on your side than you realize." Her support, even without knowing the specifics, provided emotional comfort during an increasingly stressful time. By this point, I had printed hundreds of pages of evidence from multiple sources: financial statements, email exchanges, board presentations, transaction records. I kept some documents in my locked desk drawer, others at home, and the most sensitive ones in a safety deposit box at a bank 3 miles from my apartment. True to Patricia's warning, HR began formally tracking all office resources. A memo went out announcing that all printing would now require employee ID badge swipes, and usage reports would be reviewed monthly. The system was portrayed as an environmental initiative, but the timing made the true purpose obvious. Then came the announcement that rocked the company. The executive team revealed a surprise restructuring that would significantly affect several departments, including financial operations. Jack's team, my team, would be reduced by 30%, with the remaining staff reassigned to new managers. "It's a strategic realignment," Richard explained in the town hall meeting, "positioning Westwood for the next phase of growth." But Jack and I knew the truth. They were dismantling the department most likely to uncover their fraud, dispersing the analysts who might compare notes and spot discrepancies. After the announcement, Jack seemed different, distracted, evasive. He canceled 2 of our planned meetings, citing conflicts with executive planning sessions. "They've pulled me into the restructuring committee," he explained. "I need to be careful not to raise suspicions." I understood his caution, but something felt off. Then came the email that confirmed my worst fears. It was from the company-wide announcement system. "Congratulations to Jack Hayes on his promotion to Deputy CFO, effective immediately. Jack will report directly to Diane Blackwell and oversee the financial restructuring initiative." My blood ran cold. A promotion? Now? After years in the same role, Jack was suddenly elevated just as we were preparing to expose the executive team. I tried calling him, but he didn't answer. I sent a text. "Need to talk as soon as possible." His reply came hours later. "Very busy with transition. We'll catch up soon." 3 days passed with no meaningful contact from Jack. When we finally did meet, it was in his new office, a corner space on the executive floor, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Chicago skyline. "Caitlin," he greeted me, standing behind his new desk. "Sorry for the delay. It's been chaotic." "What's going on, Jack?" I asked, not bothering to hide my confusion. "This promotion, the timing, it's not what you think," he said, though his eyes wouldn't meet mine. "I can do more to fix things from the inside. Diane and Richard trust me now. I can access everything." "So we're still moving forward with the evidence? Still planning to contact the SEC? Jack's expression changed, growing serious. "I've been reviewing everything more carefully, Caitlin. I think we may have misunderstood some of the accounting practices. What looked like fraud might be aggressive but legal financial structuring." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Misunderstood? "Jack, We found duplicate books. We found millions in hidden transactions. We found backdated documents. What part of that is a misunderstanding? He sighed. It's complicated. The regulatory environment allows for interpretation. Maybe we should take more time. Make sure we're not making career-ending accusations without absolute certainty. In that moment, I knew. Jack had switched sides. Whether tempted by power, money, or simply fear, he had abandoned our cause and joined the very people we were investigating. Congratulations on the promotion, I said flatly, standing to leave. You've earned it. His expression hardened. Be smart about this, Caitlin. Think about your future. The betrayal felt like a physical blow. I'd trusted Jack, relied on him as an ally in what felt like an increasingly dangerous situation. Now I was truly alone. That evening I stayed late at the office, trying to figure out my next move. Everyone else had gone home when a security alert popped up on my phone, motion detected on my apartment's security camera. I opened the app and watched in real time as 2 men in suits entered my building, spoke with the doorman, and were escorted to my floor. My hands trembled as I called my neighbor, asking her to check if anyone was at my door. Her reply sent chills down my spine. 2 men just went into your apartment. The doorman let them in. They said they were from your office, retrieving work documents you needed. Someone had authorized a search of my home. They were looking for my evidence. Thankfully, I'd been paranoid enough to keep nothing incriminating at my apartment, but the invasion confirmed my worst fears about how far they would go to silence me. As I sat in the darkened office, contemplating my increasingly limited options, my computer dinged with a new email. It contained a video file from an anonymous sender. With trembling fingers, I clicked play. The footage showed a conference room I recognized, one of the executive meeting spaces. Jack sat at the table with Richard, Diane, and Matthew. She has evidence, Jack was saying. Hundreds of pages. Financial statements, offshore account details, everything. And you've been helping her, Diane replied, her tone accusatory. Jack's laugh was cold. I've been monitoring her, keeping tabs on what she's found, making sure we know exactly what she has and where the gaps are. Did you really think I'd risk everything I've built here? I've been working toward this position for years. So what do we do about Miss Adams? Richard asked. HR is building a case for termination, Matthew replied. Misuse of company resources. Once she's out, we'll have legal send a cease and desist, threatening action if she misuses proprietary information. And if that doesn't work, Richard pressed. Then we move to more persuasive measures, Diane said coolly. The video ended, leaving me frozen in my chair. The sender had included just one line of text. Watch your back. Not everyone has betrayed you. Who had sent this? Tyler? Julia? Someone else entirely? Whoever it was, they'd just confirmed that not only had Jack betrayed me, but the executives were actively planning to silence me. I no longer had the luxury of time or caution. I needed to act immediately. The HR meeting request arrived by email at 9:15 the next morning. Please report to conference room 4B at 11 a.m. regarding an urgent resource compliance matter. Attendance is mandatory. I knew exactly what was coming. This was their move to neutralize me, terminate my employment, threaten legal action, and intimidate me into silence. Once I was out of the building, they would lock down my access, search my desk, and destroy whatever evidence they found. What they didn't know was that I had spent the night preparing. After seeing the video of Jack's betrayal, I'd made several crucial decisions. First, I'd compiled a complete digital copy of all evidence and encrypted it. Second, I'd contacted a former classmate who now worked at the SEC, sending her a cryptic but urgent message requesting a meeting. And third, I'd removed all evidence from my desk, distributing it between my bank box and a locked cabinet in Tyler's office that only he could access. At exactly 11 a.m., I walked into conference room 4B with a calm I didn't feel. Patricia Wilson sat at the head of the table, a thick folder in front of her. 2 members of her HR team flanked her. A company security officer stood by the door. Miss Adams, thank you for joining us, Patricia began, her tone formal. Please, have a seat. I sat, placing my phone face down on the table. The voice recorder app was already running. We've asked you here today regarding a serious matter of resource misappropriation, Patricia continued. Our records indicate that over the past 2 months, you have printed 799 pages using company printers, frequently after normal business hours. She slid a graph across the table showing my printing activity compared to the department average of 40 pages per month. This represents a clear violation of company policy regarding resource usage. Additionally, you've accessed systems outside your job responsibilities and worked irregular hours without proper authorization. I remained silent, my expression neutral. Patricia's eyes narrowed at my lack of response. We take these matters very seriously, Miss Adams. Misappropriation of company resources constitutes theft. Given the scale and pattern of these activities, we're concerned you may be operating a side business using company resources, or worse, sharing proprietary information with outside parties. My phone buzzed with a text. Patricia glanced at it irritably. Would you like to check that? It seems urgent. I turned over my phone. The message was from Tyler. They're processing your termination. Security is preparing to escort you out. Whatever you're going to do it now. I looked up at Patricia and finally spoke. You're absolutely right about one thing. 799 pages is a lot of printing. Would you like to know what's on them? Patricia seemed taken aback by my calm response. That's beside the point. The issue is the unauthorized use of... It's not beside the point, I interrupted. It's exactly the point. Those 799 pages document a 3-year financial fraud scheme orchestrated by Richard Sullivan, Diane Blackwell, and Matthew Gordon. They detail falsified financial statements, misappropriated client funds, and offshore accounts used to hide losses. The room fell silent. One of the HR assistants shifted uncomfortably. That's a very serious and completely unfounded accusation, Patricia finally said, her voice tight, one that could constitute defamation. I smiled. It would be defamation if it weren't true. But every claim is supported by documentation, much of which has already been submitted to the Securities and Exchange Commission. In fact, I had a very productive meeting with them this morning, before coming to work. This was a calculated bluff. While I had contacted my former classmate, the actual meeting with SEC investigators wasn't scheduled until that afternoon, but Patricia didn't know that. Her face paled slightly. Miss Adams, making false reports to regulatory agencies is a serious offense. If you've taken internal documents out of context and shared them inappropriately, you could face significant legal consequences. I'm fully prepared for that possibility, I replied calmly. Are Richard, Diane, and Matthew prepared for theirs? Federal fraud charges carry substantial prison sentences, and with the evidence I've provided, including the recorded conversation where they discuss silencing me, I believe the case is quite compelling. Patricia's hand trembled slightly as she closed her folder. This meeting is over. You are suspended pending investigation. Security will escort you to your desk to collect your personal belongings, then off the premises. As she stood, I remained seated. Before we wrap up, you might want to know that 4 digital copies of my evidence have been secured with instructions to release them to the SEC, the FBI, and major news outlets if anything happens to me. Just so we're clear. Patricia stared at me, her professional mask slipping to reveal genuine fear. She knew I wasn't bluffing. You have no idea what you've done, she whispered. Actually, I replied, standing to leave, I know exactly what I've done. I've chosen integrity over complicity, something you might want to consider before this all comes crashing down. As I walked out, my phone buzzed again. Another text from Tyler. SEC agents just arrived in the lobby. Not sure who called them, but all hell is about to break loose. I hadn't called them. My meeting wasn't until 4 p.m. Someone else had contacted them, perhaps the same person who had sent me the video of Jack's betrayal. By the time I reached the elevator, I could hear phones ringing throughout the office. Word was spreading. The SEC was here, and the carefully constructed fraud was about to be exposed. As the elevator doors closed, I caught a glimpse of Jack running toward the executive suite, panic clear on his face. Our eyes met for a brief moment. I didn't smile. I didn't nod. I simply watched as the doors closed between us, severing the last connection to the mentor who had betrayed me. The confrontation I had feared for weeks was now happening, but not as I had anticipated. Instead of me against them, it was now the federal government against Westwood Financial Services. And all because someone had bothered to check what I'd been printing. The next 4 hours were chaotic. SEC investigators secured the building, preventing anyone from leaving and restricting access to all computer systems. Teams of agents went floor by floor, instructing employees to step away from their devices and gathering in conference rooms. I was escorted to a private office where 2 senior investigators interviewed me for over 2 hours. I provided them with access to my evidence, explained the patterns I'd discovered, and directed them to specific documents that revealed the most damning aspects of the fraud. "You've been very thorough, Miss Adams," the lead investigator said, reviewing my organized files. "This is one of the most comprehensive whistleblower cases I've seen." "I had to be certain," I replied. "These are powerful people with a lot to lose." Through the office windows, I could see the executive floor in disarray. Agents moved in and out of offices, carrying boxes of documents and computer equipment. At one point, I saw Diane being escorted to a conference room, her usually perfect composure shattered, her face a mask of cold fury. Meanwhile, word spread throughout the company. Employees gathered in small groups, whispering anxiously. Some looked angry, others frightened. Many were on their phones, presumably calling family or friends about the unfolding situation. When the initial interviews concluded, I was allowed to collect my personal belongings under supervision. As I walked through the finance department, conversations stopped. Colleagues I'd worked with for years stared at me with expressions ranging from curiosity to outright hostility. "Thanks to you, we might all lose our jobs," one analyst muttered as I passed. "She did what she had to do," another countered quietly. Near my desk, I found Tyler waiting. He pulled me aside. "I secured everything you left with me," he said in a low voice. "The SEC has it now. Are you okay?" "I'm hanging in there," I replied. "Do you know who sent me that video? Was it you?" Tyler shook his head. "Not me. But I have a theory." He nodded discreetly toward Julia, who was being interviewed by an agent across the room. "She's worked closely with Matthew's assistant. Might have had access." Before I could respond, a commotion erupted near the elevator. Jack was trying to leave the building, a laptop bag clutched tightly under his arm. 2 agents intercepted him, speaking in urgent but hushed tones. Jack's face reddened as he gesticulated wildly, pointing toward the executive floor. The agents remained firm, and eventually escorted him back toward the conference rooms, his laptop confiscated. "He was trying to run," Tyler observed. "Not a good look for the newly appointed deputy CFO. Patricia appeared at the entrance to the department, her face ashen. When she spotted me, she marched over, trembling with barely controlled rage. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" she hissed. "The ripple effects of this? The clients who will pull their business? The employees who will lose their livelihoods?" "I didn't create this situation, Patricia," I replied evenly. "Richard, Diane, and Matthew did when they decided to commit fraud. You did when you helped cover it up." Her eyes widened. "I never covered anything up. I was just doing my job." "Your job included intimidating employees who asked too many questions, creating pretext to fire anyone who looked too closely at the numbers. You were their first line of defense." Patricia stepped back as if I'd slapped her. "You don't understand the pressures, the responsibilities." "I understand choosing right over wrong," I cut her off. "Everything else is just excuses." As the day progressed, the situation grew increasingly tense. The company's stock, which had been trading at $87 that morning, was halted after dropping 20% on rumors of regulatory action. News vans gathered outside the building. Employees were finally allowed to leave around 6 p.m., but many executives were kept for further questioning. By evening, 3 security guards were escorting Richard, Diane, and Matthew from the building. No handcuffs, but the humiliation was clear as they walked past employees and news cameras. Jack was among the last to leave, pale and shaken after hours of questioning. I was about to head home when Julia approached me in the lobby. "That took courage," she said simply. "What you did." "Thank you," I replied. "For everything." She nodded, understanding my meaning. Sometimes doing the right thing means taking risks. I learned that from my last job. With that cryptic comment, she headed out into the evening. I arrived home mentally and physically exhausted. My apartment had been searched, but nothing appeared damaged or missing. Still, the violation left me feeling unsafe. I booked a hotel room for the night, not willing to stay there alone. As I packed an overnight bag, my phone rang. It was Allison. "Caitlin, what the hell is happening? Your company is all over the news. Something about fraud and SEC raids." I hadn't even thought about how this would affect my family. "It's complicated, Allie. I can't really talk about it yet. Are you okay? Do you still have a job? What's going on?" "I'm fine. As for the job, that's unclear. But I did the right thing." There was a pause. "Oh my God. You're the whistleblower, aren't you?" The news mentioned a whistleblower. I didn't confirm or deny it, but my silence was answer enough. "Jesus, Caitlin, I don't even know what to say." "There's something else you should know," I said reluctantly. "Your retirement account. How much of it is invested in Westwood stock?" Another pause, longer this time. "About 40%. Why?" My stomach sank. I hadn't considered that my sister's financial future might be collateral damage in my pursuit of justice. "You should call your financial advisor tomorrow. The stock. It's not going to recover." The silence that followed was painful. Finally, Allison spoke, her voice tight. "So you're telling me that my retirement fund just took a massive hit because of something you did? Because of fraud that I exposed?" I corrected gently. "This isn't on me, Ally. The company was built on lies. Those stocks were overvalued because of false reporting." "That doesn't change the fact that I just lost a huge chunk of my savings," she snapped. "What am I supposed to tell Dan? The kids' college funds are in there too." The weight of unintended consequences settled heavily on my shoulders. "I'm sorry, Allie. I truly am. But what was I supposed to do? Let them keep defrauding people? Let them fire me and cover it all up?" Her sigh was weary. "I don't know, Kate. I need to process this. I'll call you tomorrow." She hung up before I could respond. Sitting alone in my violated apartment, the victory of exposing the fraud suddenly felt hollow. I'd done the right thing, but at what cost? My career was in limbo. My relationship with my sister was strained. My safety was potentially at risk. For the first time since this began, I allowed myself to cry. For the trust broken, the security lost, and the painful reminder that even righteous actions can hurt those we love. 3 months passed before some semblance of normalcy returned to my life. Those months were filled with endless interviews, depositions, and legal consultations as the case against Westwood's executives took shape. The evidence I'd gathered proved invaluable to prosecutors. Richard, Diane, and Matthew were indicted on multiple federal charges, including securities fraud, wire fraud, and making false statements to investors. The indictments detailed a scheme that had defrauded shareholders and clients of over $300 million over 3 years. Jack faced lesser charges but was still looking at significant prison time. In a move that surprised no one, he accepted a plea deal in exchange for testifying against the others. His testimony revealed how the executives had systematically falsified financial reports while enriching themselves through bonuses and stock sales. Patricia Wilson wasn't criminally charged, but was removed from her position for obstruction of justice after evidence emerged that she had attempted to delete security footage and employee communications related to the case. The media coverage was intense. Financial news channels dissected every detail of the Westwood fraud, as it was now called. My name eventually leaked, and reporters camped outside my apartment building for days, hoping for interviews I refused to give. Westwood itself was in turmoil. The stock had plummeted to $12, with trading often halted due to volatility. Clients withdrew their business in droves. A new executive team was hastily assembled from outside the company, tasked with salvaging what remained of its reputation and operations. For the employees, the impact varied. Some departments were gutted by layoffs as the company contracted. Others remained intact but under intense scrutiny from new management and external auditors. The atmosphere of fear and uncertainty was palpable in every communication from former colleagues. My own career hung in an uncertain balance. I was technically still employed but on paid administrative leave during the investigation. I had no desire to return to Westwood, but the whispered question in financial circles was whether I was a heroic whistleblower or an unemployable troublemaker. Would other companies view me as a person of integrity or a potential liability? The most difficult aspect was my relationship with Allison. The collapse of Westwood's stock had indeed impacted her family's finances significantly. While they hadn't lost everything, the college funds for her children had been reduced by nearly 30%, and their retirement planning had suffered a serious setback. After 2 weeks of strained communication, I invited myself to Sunday dinner at her house, determined to repair the damage. "I know you're angry," I said as we sat on her back porch after the meal, her husband and children inside watching a movie. "You have every right to be." Allison sighed, swirling the wine in her glass. "I'm not angry anymore, Kate. Just disappointed, I guess. Not in you exactly. More in the situation. In the fact that doing the right thing cost us so much." "I've been thinking about that," I replied. "About the cost of integrity. If I'd known how this would affect you, would I still have done it? Should I have done it differently? Those questions keep me up at night." She looked at me directly for the first time that evening. "Would you have done it differently?" I considered the question carefully. I would still have exposed the fraud. It was too significant, affected too many people, but I would have warned you first, helped you move your investments, protected you and the kids better. Allison nodded slowly. "For what it's worth, Dan and I talked about it a lot, and eventually we decided that we'd rather lose some money than have you compromise your principles. We're teaching the kids about integrity being non-negotiable. How could we face them if we suggested you should have looked the other way?" The knot that had been in my chest for weeks loosened slightly. "I'll make it right, Ollie. I promise." "I know you will," she replied, reaching for my hand. "You always do." As the legal case progressed, my professional future began to clarify. I received job offers from 3 different sources: a regulatory agency impressed by my thoroughness, a forensic accounting firm specializing in fraud investigation, and surprisingly, the restructured Westwood itself, which was desperate to demonstrate its commitment to ethical practices. Most unexpected was a call from the Securities and Exchange Commission. They were impressed by my documentation and analysis, and offered me a position as a financial analyst in their enforcement division. The irony wasn't lost on me. The skills I'd developed working at Westwood would now be used to identify similar fraud at other companies. Through all of this, Tyler remained a steadfast support. He checked on me regularly, kept me updated on changes at Westwood, and provided emotional support when the stress became overwhelming. 6 weeks after the initial SEC raid, Tyler invited me to dinner at a small Italian restaurant we both liked. After appetizers and casual conversation, his demeanor changed, becoming more serious. "There's something I need to tell you, Caitlin," he began nervously. "Something I should have said a long time ago. You're the one who sent me the video of Jack's betrayal, I guessed." He smiled and shook his head. "No, that was Julia. She had suspicions about Matthew for months and had been documenting things on her own. We compared notes after everything happened." "Then what is it?" I asked. Tyler took a deep breath. "I've had feelings for you for years, more than friendship. I never said anything because the timing never seemed right, and I valued our friendship too much to risk it. But after everything that's happened, I've realized that life's too short to leave important things unsaid." The confession caught me completely off guard. I'd been so focused on the fraud investigation, so consumed by evidence and risk and consequences, that I'd been blind to something happening right in front of me. "I don't know what to say," I admitted. "You don't have to say anything," Tyler replied quickly. "I'm not expecting anything. I just needed you to know." Looking at him across the table, Tyler, who had helped me gather evidence, who had warned me when I was in danger, who had stood by me when others turned away, I felt something shift. Perhaps there had always been potential for something more between us, hidden beneath the comfortable layers of friendship and professional collaboration. "I think," I said carefully, "that when the dust settles and my life isn't quite so chaotic, we should have another dinner and another conversation." His smile was worth the uncertainty. 3 months after the initial SEC raid, the first trial date was set. Richard Sullivan would face a jury in federal court, with Diane and Matthew scheduled for subsequent trials. The evidence was overwhelming, and prosecutors were confident of convictions. Westwood Financial Services underwent a complete restructuring, with new leadership committed to transparency and compliance. New policies protecting whistleblowers were established, and ethical conduct became the centerpiece of company training. As for me, I accepted the position with the SEC's Enforcement Division. The work aligned perfectly with my skills and newfound purpose. I would be using my financial expertise to identify potential fraud, protect investors, and ensure market integrity. My first assignment was developing a training program for financial analysts, teaching them to recognize the warning signs of corporate fraud, the same signs I had initially missed and later discovered at Westwood. Standing before a room of analysts at my first training session, I felt a sense of purpose I had never experienced at Westwood. Financial statements tell stories, I began, unconsciously echoing Jack's words but giving them new meaning. Our job is to make sure those stories are true. Not just accurate in their calculations, but honest in their intent. Because behind every spreadsheet are real people whose financial security depends on our integrity. As I looked at the attentive faces of these analysts, people committed to truth and transparency, I reflected on the journey that had brought me here. The late nights gathering evidence, the fear of standing alone, the painful costs of doing what was right. Would I do it all again, knowing what I know now, without hesitation? Sometimes the greatest acts of courage aren't grand heroic moments, but simple decisions to stand for truth when it would be easier to look away. True integrity means doing what's right even when it comes at personal cost. That was the lesson I had learned, the wisdom I had earned through difficult experience. The 799 pages I printed hadn't just exposed a fraud. They had revealed a path forward, not just for me, but for everyone who believes that honesty still matters, that systems can be improved, and that one person's commitment to truth can indeed change things for the better. What would you do if you discovered wrongdoing at your workplace? Would you have the courage to stand up, even knowing the personal cost might be high? Have you ever faced an ethical dilemma where doing the right thing came at a significant personal price? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with others who might find value in it. Thank you for listening to my journey, and I wish you the courage to always stand for what's right, even when it's difficult.